everybody. Welcome to another show where Chris and I talk about stuff that are out. I am Michael Curtis, Director of Product Development for Dungeon Crawl Classics, and with me is my counterpart.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris Doyle. I'm the Director of Product Development on the 5e side of Goodman Games. Great to be here and everything. We've got a lot to talk about.
Yes, not all in this one video. They keep trying to keep this reasonable, but we are here today to talk about something we've talked about before, but it's time to talk about again, and that is the Caverns of Thracia, which is going to be appearing in the Goodman Games web shop and other fine local game stores around the world in short order. So here we are. So let's just dive in. Chris, what was Caverns of Thracia? Remind me. It was a big book of adventure, right? It was originally
Yes. So
Janelle Jacques.
Caverns of Thracia, written by Janelle Jacques, 300 plus pages of Megadungeon crawl. If you're familiar with OAR number 7, Dark Tower, this is kind of the spiritual successor to that. This one is suitable for lower level adventures. You can start at first level with this, and this is it's I always says caverns underneath a ruined city. Actually, the city's kind of in a jungle and it's kind of overgrown and everything. And then you've got all these different dungeon levels underneath, and typical Jacques style. There's lots of different ways in and out. It's not this standard. Here's a dungeon level, dungeon level, dungeon level. There's even some sub levels and everything. So yeah, and it has a noticeably Grecian, I think is the word, Grecian theme to it. So minotaurs and stuff.
Yep. Four main levels, and then there's a couple of sub levels scripted in there.
Yes.
Easily a year plus worth of gaming funness, by the time you run through that. And of course we have versions available. We converted this for both DCC and 5e, so no matter what your preference is, whether you like one or both, you can find it exactly for you. We not only did we convert the original stuff, which has a lot of interesting, there's a lot of interesting elements in there. There's plenty. Not only is there plenty of opportunities to get in a fight with monsters, but there's also plenty of opportunities for role playing because there's a lot of different factions in the dungeons.
Yes.
Some of them are kind of opposed to each other. Some of them are friendly, so you never know what kind of situation you're going to get into. Plenty of exploration opportunities. All like the three main pillars of basically good dungeon design in there and ready for your gaming table. So,
Yeah.
you can start off on the first level and then slowly work your way down. And of course, in true fashions, the monsters get a little harder. So that whole thing where things are connected, but all the levels are connected. So you may find yourself in over your head if you're not careful, or you could find yourself getting some cool treasure, some cool magical items, which helps you overcome the other stuff that is on that level. So yeah. The
Yeah.
as part of this, we added another sub level as well,
You
so we
did.
kind of expanded on that. That was actually a Temple of Triton, if I remember correctly. It gets kind of like snuck in there as well. So
Yes. Yeah,
going
there's a river, and we actually put an additional sub level. So there was one sub level 3A, I believe it was in the original. We added sub level 2A, and completely it was one of the stretch goals and everything, but we felt that it was really important to put it in the main book because it did really stand aside. Like you weren't really going to be able to use it outside of using the main book. So yeah, really excited about that. A couple other things about this awesome book is it's got a reprint of the original adventure in there, so you can see in all of its first edition glory of what is like. We also have an impressive slate of interviews by some industry luminaries in there. Kelsey Dion of Shadow Dark fame. This is her favorite adventure, so we tapped her to do an essay. Mike Merles, you guys might have heard of Mike Merles. He did an essay. Kenneth Haidt, and then Scott Moore, our own Scott Moore, and Bob Brinkman. They both handled the conversions, 5e and DCC respectively. We actually asked them to each write kind of like a little essay on their experiences with Caverns of Thracia. Of course, they both remember the originals and also some of the trials and tribulations that they went through. And then to cap it all off, we have an amazing interview that was conducted with Janelle before she unfortunately passed away. And we included that in this as well. So there is a lot of really good meaty kind of essay and introspective, retrospective bits in there that I think folks are just going to absolutely love.
but it's not all dry academic looking back stuff, because in addition to that, we for a lot of this includes new monsters and NPCs to use to your campaign. Dozens of there's a slightly
Yeah.
discrepancy between the DCC and the 5e side, because we had to create some stats for some DCC monsters which aren't there. And 5e had to do a little bit on the same, but less of that. It was more about the NPC stuff. So,
Yeah.
there's 30 or 40 new monsters and stuff in there, not to mention new magic items. So there's plenty of other stuff to add to the campaign once you're done reading all the cool background stuff and you're actually running this. So if you're a DM or if you're a judge, there's plenty of stuff to pull from there and use in your campaigns, even if you're not going to run Thracia. And if you are running it, if you're a player going through Thracia, there's plenty of new loot that you can get your hands on, which will become
Yes.
very useful later on. So no matter if you're running it or playing it, it's all good. So,
Yeah.
um,
And there's two different versions of the book. There's the standard cover version that you're going to see, but there's also a limited edition. We're calling it the Minotaur cover or the Minotaur
Mentor hide.
texture cover. Yeah, faux hide. No Minotaurs were slaughtered during the making of that cover of the book. So if you're lucky enough that your local store, or you can grab one in our web store, you might be able to pick up the special limited edition one, which is kind of neat. And there is so much. This is such a ripe setting, a true sandboxy. I would even say a bit more than a sandbox than Dark Tower was. And there's so many ways that you can expand the material here. We've done that. We're going to talk about it in another video, actually, of all the additional things that we just went crazy and went nuts, and eventually had to be told stop.
There's too much to add in this video, so we have to do a whole separate video on how much support stuff is out there. So stay
Yeah.
tuned. That should be coming soon.
Yes, that will be coming next. And are we gonna talk about dice on this one, or we want to talk about
No,
dice?
let's talk about dice on support one. Although there's
All
plenty,
right, we'll talk about dice on the flip side. A little
all right,
teaser.
plenty of stuff about Caverns of Thracia stuff. So, as we mentioned, you can start it off as a first level adventure, and then you can easily get, you probably in DCC, you probably get, third or fourth level just playing through this one itself in the end. So you're probably
Yeah,
fifth or sixth by the time you're done with this, maybe.
easily. Yeah,
Yeah,
easily. Yeah,
and
your mileage will vary depending on how you do experience on the 5e side. So,
right. Or and
so
how many encounters you have, and how often you run away, and how many people die in the process of it.
yep.
Because it's old school in the way it doesn't pull its punches. I mean,
So
you can easily get yourself over your head, but at the same time you could also not. So
yeah,
so
definitely. So
yeah. Highly entertaining. I know Kenneth Haidt, he wrote his essay. This was so important to him because this began his love affair with taking real world stuff and putting a fantasy spin on it. And Janelle did a wonderful chance. As I said, there's a whole Thracian and Grecian theme through it. So Minotaurs. There's a whole backstory about beast men and beast folk, and then so you have dog folk and dog brothers, and then you have Minotaurs and lizard folk and everything. So there's all these separate cultures out there. So there's plenty of stuff to learn. And it's also, so yeah, actually there's a bit of a mystery going on because you don't know anything about the history of the dungeon. But as you're exploring it, you're finding leftover pieces, you're meeting new NPCs, some of them who've been around since the original. There's a couple of people who are literally deep frozen, and if you thaw them out, they can give you more information about it. So
yeah.
so if you tend to like more investigation type role playing games like Call of Cthulhu or something like that, there is a bit of that element for you. So maybe if you're not really into hack and slash dungeon stuff, but you like solving problems and dealing with NPCs and interviewing people, there's that element in this one. Now, there's a little something for everybody in Caverns of Thracia. You cannot go wrong with it.
There definitely is. And I mean, the factions alone are fascinating, and they'll provide so many role-playing opportunities. And like you said, it really leans into the factions and the exploration side of adventuring. So if that's what your group loves, it's going to be perfect for them. So without a doubt.
Okay. I think we could talk more about it, but we know people's extension spans. You busy people, you got more to do. So we're gonna wrap things up. We're gonna couple more videos coming your way. We'll talk more about what is available when Caverns of Thracia and all the associated stuff arrive in local stores, both brick and mortar and digital, in the coming days ahead. So keep an eye on this. Do the usual thing you're supposed to do with these videos, which is like, subscribe, and ring little bells, and do it all everything, and you will get notified when the next video about Caverns of Thracia, this gigantic release, is going to be available, and we'll talk to you then.
All right. See you, everybody.
Bye.